When I was a teenager, I was with my father and we went over to a friend's house. And I walked into my father's friend's house and I saw an aquarium, maybe a 30 gallon aquarium, maybe a little larger. And what shocked me about that aquarium was it had a shark in that aquarium, a saltwater shark in that aquarium, that 30-foot aquarium, and that shark was about 6 to 8 inches long. And I wondered, and I asked my father's friends, how could that shark that's supposed to be 8 feet or grows to 8 feet long, maybe 10, stay inside of that aquarium? And he told me that the size of a shark is determined by the size of its environment. In other words, if you put it in a larger fish tank or aquarium, a 60 gallon or maybe 100 gallon, it will grow to the size of that aquarium. So in this case, we had a shark 68 inches living in a 30-gallon aquarium. And so just like the size of a shark is determined by its environment, the amount of our faith in God is determined by our testing. The more difficult the test, the more pain, the more adversity that it brings, the greater our faith. How do I know that's true? I'll just say that in times of prosperity, in times of when things are going well, we praise God, our faith may grow by this much. But if you bring into adversity and pain, death of a loved one, illness, whatever it may be, some type of trial or tribulation, our faith in God grows enormously. And so today we're going to meet a man, and we're going to meet a man who's been tested or being tested by God. And we're going to see how he responds. And we're going to see proof of his faith in God. Stay tuned. You and I are going to have a fabulous lesson together. Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. John W. Wilson III, bringing you the Sunday School lesson for this Sunday, June the 15th, 2025. I want to thank you for joining me on today. The title of our lesson is Abraham Makes an Offering. Abraham makes an offering. It will come from Genesis, the 22nd chapter. We'll look at verses 1 through 14. Genesis 22, verses 1 through 14. So before we get started, I want to say Happy Father's Day to everyone. I'm a proud father of 5 young men, and I want to just say to all the fathers, to all the uncles, to all the mentors, your leadership, your godly leadership is needed more now than it's ever been. Keep up the good work. Keep leading your families. Keep mentoring. Keep being that role model that we all desperately need. Be that example of Christ to them. So I want to thank you in advance for doing that. Let's get into our lesson today. We're talking about Abraham. Abraham's the father of the faith, the Jewish faith. God made promises to him that his descendants would outnumber the sands of the sea, the stars in the sky, too numerous to count. And so he made that promise when Abraham was 75 years old. At age 100, Sarah's 90. Isaac is born, and Isaac is going to carry out the lineage or the legacy of Abraham. And that's the tension that's going to be in our passage today. So let's look at our lesson in chapter 22. It says, after these things, after what things? Well, we have, the first thing we have is that Abraham and Sarah go to Egypt to avoid a famine in the promised land, in their land. And he lies and does that kind of stuff. But in the midst of that, the king of Egypt takes Sarah as his wife. Calamity happens to him. He says, "What have you done to me?" He associates the calamity with Abraham. And then he finds out that Sarah is not Abraham's really sister, it's his wife. And then he says, "Why have you done this to me?" So he gives him all kind of wealth to leave. And one of the people that he gives with him is a maidservant named Hagar. As you know, what happens there, they're struggling with the children. They think this is the way God wants them to have a child. So Ishmael is born between Hagar and Abraham. And then as Ishmael grows up, at age 100 for Abraham, 90 for Sarah, she gives birth to Isaac. That's the child that was promised by God to help populate the world, the Jewish race, to further the Jewish race. And so Sarah becomes antagonistic with Hagar. She becomes very defensive with Isaac, and Ishmael and Hagar have to go. So they're kicked out of the household under God's sovereign protection. God takes care of them. In fact, Ishmael grows up to have a tremendous kingdom in the Middle East. Okay, and then and that's what happened. Okay, and then after that, the Bible talks about how wealthy Abraham is, how well he's doing, how good his life has been for them. And their life could not be better. He has a son that he's longed for. Sarah has a son that she longed for. God has answered their prayer, even at an old age, to a testament of God's faithfulness. And everything seemed to be going right. They were successful. They were a happy family. Things just seemed right. Abraham's relationship with God was growing. He has made some mistakes in the past. He had told some lies on several different occasions there. But during this period, when Isaac was born and all the promises was answered, his faith in God began to grow. And so as we look in chapter 22, it says, after these things, God tested Abraham. Now, when you hear the word tested, what does it mean, God tested? Okay, what it means is that the word test means to verify, to prove, to confirm, or to put on display. So when he says he tested Abraham, that means that his faith is going to be confirmed, it's going to be proven, it's going to be put on display, it's going to be verified. Well, you may be saying, well, God already knows what the end from the beginning. He already knows what's going to happen. And he does. But in reality, it has not happened. It haven't happened in space and time. It has not happened in reality, even though God knows that it will. And even though God is not confined by time, technically his faith has not been proven. It has not been verified. So therefore, when Abraham, this test, or when he passes this test, it's as if God is seeing it for the very first time. So I want you to remember that, because I'm going to come back to that. So testing is to verify, to document, to prove. So God's going to prove or document Abraham's faith. And we have to ask ourselves that when we hear the test, are we open to God testing us? Nobody likes those type of tests, because we never know what they are, and we never know reality. Abraham didn't realize to a certain extent that he was being tested. But it's like a teacher, a good teacher, and this is a quasi analogy, but I'll make it work for us. A teacher gives a test, a good teacher gives a test to validate or prove what the student knows. Now, in this example, the teacher doesn't know how the student is going to perform, but the test is not given to have the student fail. The teacher has prepared the students for the testing, has given them maybe a sheet to work for, what's going to be on it, and the test that she gives, she wants them to succeed. Now, in God's place, he does know the end, so he knows how we're going to respond, But he's given a test for the same reason, so that you and I can succeed, so we can pass the test. Now, the word test, if you look in the Greek language, it's the opposite of it is temptation, the same word. So Satan tempts us so that we can fail. God tests us so that we can succeed. The more we pass these tests, the stronger our faith grows, the more God could use us. And Satan's idea is that the more I can tempt them to fail, the more that God cannot use them and will not use them. So testing by God is important for a Christian, for a child of God. It is to be expected. So it says here, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, okay? God calls out his name audibly, okay? And he said, here I am. Look what Abraham does. Look at his attitude. God calls out his name, Abraham. He recognized the voice of God, the sound of God. And that means a relationship. And he says, here I am. Like, here I am, your good and faithful servant. Your wish is my command. What would you have me do? He's ready, attentive to God. What do you want me to do? What do you need me to do? I will do what you ask. I don't know what it is, but I will do it. A lot of times when God calls us out, he may say, John, Sally, Mary, whoever. And we may ignore him for the first 3 or 4 times. May not even answer him at all. Because we're scared of what God may be asking us to do. Sometimes we don't want to hear from God because that means something's coming up and it may change our situation. But Abraham gives us a perfect example of a faithful and obedient servant. So he's responding to this test. He doesn't know what's coming, but we can see, we have hindsight here. He's responding well because he's heard God's heard God's voice. And that's a testimony to the type of relationship he had with God. They are close. They are bonded. He's in tune with God. He's expecting to hear from God. He says, here I am, he said. This is what God said. Take your son, your only son, Isaac. So he said, take your son, your only son, Isaac. Abraham, when he says only son, yes, he had 2, Ishmael and Isaac, but Ishmael is off the scene, but his only son that's going to carry out the promises of God. The promises that God made to Abraham are going to be not channeled through Ishmael, but they're going to be channeled through Isaac. So that's what he says, your only son. This is the son that I intended for you. Not that he doesn't love Ishmael, but this is the son that was part of the God's divine plan. It says, whom you love deeply. Abraham waited 20 and Sarah waited 25 years for Isaac to be born, for the promise to be fulfilled. Had the baby at old age. Other people said it was never going to happen, that they had done something wrong. Sarah had sinned, her womb was closed. She has passed her menstrual cycle. It was no hope for them having a child. And so he loved this child dearly. And right now, Isaac is probably 13, 14 years old. He's bonded with his son. Abraham has spent a lot of time. What an appropriate message for Father's Day. What an example of a father. He loved his one and only son. And it says here, whom you love, okay? And that brings us to Jesus. It's almost like this. You're only begotten, for God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son. That's one and only son, okay? And so it kind of brings that. We'll come back to that. Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love deeply, who means everything to you, who is the world to you, okay? Who you have only one of, okay? The one that I promised you, the one that you had in old age, the only child that you will ever have, maybe, and go to the land of Moriah, okay? The land of Moriah, okay? That's where the temple would be built. That's what scholars say later on. And offer him, so take your son, offer him there as a burnt offering. What does that mean? Offer him as a burnt offering. A burnt offering was an animal sacrifice that was burned completely and given as a dedication to God. So what God is telling him, and the test is, take the son that you love deeply, the only one that you have, the one that I promised you, and take him and to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering, meaning that as a sacrifice to me on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. Okay. What's the test? Okay, what's God trying to prove or verify? What is he trying to put on display? What is he trying to see in space and time? He's trying to see if Abraham, or document, loves him more than anything else in the world. And that's his son. This is a testimony to how much he loved Isaac. God wants to say, do you love me more than you love Isaac? And sometimes God asks us that. Do you love your children? Do you love me more than you love your children? Some parents love their children more than anything, more than their relationship with God. Some people love their material possessions more than they love God. Their house, their car, their job, their status, their position, their money in the bank. And so this test here is a test to us. Is there anything that you put ahead of God? Is there anything that you love more than God? If it is, you need to put it on the altar and burn it up and make it a burnt offering to God and make God number one in your life. So this is the test. Abraham, who do you love more? God knows the answer, but it needs to be displayed in space and time. So he sees it for the first time. And so it is documented. And Abraham sees it. And it's documented and verified and confirmed so it can be said so. It's hard to say that you love God more than anything and you've never been tested. It's never been verified. It's never been confirmed. A lot of people say, oh, I love God, I love God. Let's see it. Let's wait till a test comes. Let's put it to the test. And so this is being put to the test. This is critical. And we have to do some soul searching and ask ourselves, is there anything that we love more than God? Is there anything more important to us than God himself? And we have to ask ourselves, there are things that we would struggle getting rid of. We love our children and we love our things. And we love our money in the bank. We love our lifestyle. Are we willing to give up all those things if God asked us to do it? Okay? All right, so it's a good tension there. Abraham loves his son. He loves God. But who does he love more? And that's the question right there. Okay? So let's see. All right. It says, so Abraham rose early in the morning. I like this. Act of obedience. Act of faith. He rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey. I know if God asked me to sacrifice one of my sons, I would sleep in the next day. I would delay what he had asked me to do. I would try to put it off. But look what Abraham rises early in the morning to obey God, to display his faithfulness. He's on the right track of passing this test. He rises. He doesn't delay, doesn't procrastinate. Now, is he thrilled about it? No. But he loves God. And God is a priority. So he rises early in the morning. He saddles his donkey. So he doesn't ask his servants to do it. He does it himself. He makes sure it's done right. He makes sure that he's involved in it. He's not putting it off on somebody else. And took two of his young men with him and his son Isaac. And Abraham cut the wood for the burnt offering. He's making this personal. He said, God, I'm going to do this myself for you. So he's cut the wood for the burnt offering. That means that offering is consumed entirely for God. There's no sharing or anything. Complete devotion, dedication to God. and arose and went to the place which God had told him. So he rises early. I love that. Gets the wood, goes to the place in which God had told him. Okay? All right. On his third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar, the place where God wanted him to go to make this burnt offering. Then Abraham said to his young man, stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. Look at the faith. He doesn't know how it's going to work out. Doesn't know what God's going to do. But he says, young man, stay here with the donkey. So it's going to be not going to be a worship for them involved. It's going to be a worship between Isaac, Abraham, and God. He's going to lead the young men out. They will not see it. This is a private worship between the three of them. Okay? And he said, look at his vote of confidence, faithfulness. I and the boy will go over there and worship. Okay? What is worship? Make a sacrifice. Okay? Make a sacrifice. And come again to you. He knows somehow if he carries out this sacrifice, this burnt offering, God is going to raise them from the dead, and then they're going to come back to these two young men and go back home. He doesn't know all what's going to happen, but he knows that God made this promise of Isaac being his son, and his legacy, or the people of his people will come out of his lineage or his line. So he knows that promise there, but he knows that God told him to do a burnt offering. And so he's trying to reconcile those two. He doesn't know how it all is going to work, but he knows that God's going to make it work some kind of way. And sometimes we find out a situation too. We feel God has promised us this, but we're in a trial of this, and they seem to conflict one another. And we're wondering, how is God going to make it work? Well, God makes it work somehow. Only he makes it work in a way only he can make it work. Okay? God promised you this job, but it seems like you're going to lose this job. Well, God reconciles, and something happens. Either you get a better job, or you get a higher promotion, or something happens, or this situation is head on and you're there. God does amazing things. That's all I'm trying to say. Amazing things. Verse 6, and Abraham took the wood and burnt offering and laid it on his son, on Isaac his son. So he's at the altar. Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, laid it on Isaac his son, okay, and he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So Isaac is carrying the wood. Some people liken that to Jesus Christ carrying his cross to Calvary. And so he took the knife, he took in his hand fire and the knife. Okay, so they went, both of them, together. And Isaac said to his father, Isaac, a sharp young man, he's very observant. He has seen many different sacrifices. He's seen burnt offerings. He's seen all the sacrifices that need to take place. He knows that they're going to make some type of sacrifice, some type of burnt offering, but he doesn't see the animal. Okay? And so he's a young boy, he's inquisitive. He says, something's missing here. Something's not right. He said, and Isaac said to his father, Abram, my father. And he said, here I am, my son. So he says, so let me read that again. And Isaac said to his father, Abraham, my father. And he said, here I am, my son. And he said, behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? What a powerful question. Abraham says, God will provide for himself the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. So they went both of them together. Okay. Look how I love the way Abraham answers this. God will provide for himself the lamb. Didn't lie to him, didn't mislead him. He said that God will provide a lamb, and that's true, for his burnt offering. And that calmed Isaac down. Verse 9, when they came to the place which God had told them, Abraham built an altar there and laid wood in order and bound Isaac his son, laid him on the altar on top of the wood. I love it that Isaac is obedient to his father. He trusts his father, allows himself to be bound, placed on the altar for the sacrifice, which is seemingly to be him. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven. Okay? Said, Abraham, Abraham. I mean, I said it with urgency. He only needed to say it once, but he said it twice to display a sense of urgency. And he said, here I am. He said, do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God. So Abraham passed the test. His fear of God meant that he loved God more than anything else. He feared God more than anything else. He loved God more than he loved his son. He was willing to sacrifice his son in obedience to God. So now it's been put on display in space and time. It's been proven. It's been verified. God has seen it for the first time. He knew it, but he has seen it for the first time. For now I know, it's not if God did not know, but it's been verified. That's the point I want to make. Now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Now I know you love me more than anything else. A lot of times God gives us things and we begin to love that thing or that person more than anything else. And God says, no, 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 no. I will always be first. I will always be first. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. He said, look, remember he said in verse 8, God will provide for himself a lamb. God did that. Abraham, wherever it happened between Ishmael leaving and to this point, Abraham's faith grew so much. His relationship with God grew so much. Look at what he's saying. In verse 8, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering. Words of faith. Look what he said before that. He said to the two young men, I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. Words of faith. Words of faith. Look how much he's grown. It's no wonder that he passed his test. He had grown. Okay? Abraham, and sometimes we grow by ups and downs. He hasn't been a perfect role model. He lied. He did this. He did that. But he learned from it and saw how God responded to him even when he failed. How God loved him anyway. He responded to how good God has been to him in the past. And so when we go through our testing, we need to be a historian like Abraham is and remember how good God has been to us, how trustworthy he's been, how faithful he's been to us, how he's loved us in spite of who we are. And we need to trust him to continue to love us even more and be faithful to us. And that's what's happening here. And if we can be a good historian, we can pass the test that God has placed before us, that has allowed us to go through, and our faith can grow and grow and grow. But our faith has to grow through pain. It has to grow through adversity. It has to grow through hardship. It grows by inches when times are good. It grows by eons when we're faced with some type of trial or adversity, a death of a loved one, loss of a job, loss of finances. When we're going through difficult times, we lean on God more than we never have. We trust him more when things are not going well. When we're faced with a difficult test and we see how good God is. Okay? The test is when your faith is when God pushes you through a test that is very uncomfortable. What is God asking you to give up? What is God saying? You need to put me above that. That's what we have to ask ourselves. What's more important to us than our relationship with God? What's keeping us from fully committing to God? That's what we have to ask ourselves. Okay? All right. It says, so Abraham called this place, okay? The Lord will provide, because the Lord provided. Okay? As it is said to this day, on the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. Okay. What do we learn from this? What I learned from this is that God does not tempt us, he tests us. He brings us through things so that we can put our trust in him or document our trust in him so our faith can grow. When our faith grows, God can use us even more and bless us even more. Okay? Sometimes we can say we have faith. We can say this and this and that and what we'll do. But sometimes it has to be proven in space and time for not only God to see, but for the whole world to see. And that's what we see. We see Abraham is called the father of the faith for this specific reason right here. His obedience to God. Okay? All righty. Well, thank you for joining me today. I know I've been away for the past couple of weeks. I just had some personal matters to take care of. I got them taken care of. And I'm glad to be back. I've missed this. I love going through these lessons. I love the Sunday school lesson. I missed it dearly, but I want to say it's good to be back, and thank you for your patience. I want you to have a great Sunday, a great Sunday school. I hope something I've said has been a benefit to you as a student or a teacher. I want to say God is good. God is not setting you up to fail. He's setting you up to pass. He wants you to be an A student. He wants you to pass the test. Okay? Don't confuse the two. Don't say, when you say, God, why am I why am I going this? Why does this happen to me? When you're saying those words, it should click in the word test. And when it should click in, Abraham, here I am. Lord, what would you have me do? That's passing the test. Here I am. Here I am. Lord, what would you have me to do? God bless you. Love you much. We'll talk again next week.